seated and then we'll get started.
So I think that I'm ready to start, and we will. We have this usual meeting in the occasion of the opening of the General Assembly. So welcome everyone. So Your Excellencies, this Dr. Ali Al-Nuaimi, Vice President of the Interparliamentary Union and senior member of the UAE Federal National Council. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it's my honor to welcome you all the 10th edition of the Arena Legislators Forum. I would like to take this opportunity to personally welcome our esteemed attendees and guests, as well as our session moderator, Mr. John Defterios, my friends, visiting professor of business at the New York University, Abu Dhabi.
Thank you.
Your presence today highlights our global commitment to expanding renewable energy and facilitating climate action. As a critical platform for driving legislative action toward a sustainable energy future, this year's discussions are particularly significant as we work to align legislative pathways with the ambition COP28 UAE consensus goals of tripling renewable energy capacity and doubling energy efficiency by 2030. As we approach a decisive year for climate action, it is essential to reflect on the progress and challenges before us. The next 12 months hold immense significance for global climate action as countries prepare to submit updated nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement. Recent analysis, including those from the IPCC and ARENA, have painted a clear and urgent picture. The window to limit global warming to 1.5 Celsius is narrowing. In 2023, global CO2 emissions from energy sources reached 37.4 gigatons, positioning the energy sector as the primary contributor to the global emissions. Last year was projected to be the warmest year on record, and the past decade has been the hottest since 1850. This underscores the urgency of addressing climate change and an extraordinary opportunity, one that demands bold legislative leadership. With the 2025 deadline for submitting NDC 3.0 fast approaching, we have a unique opportunity to incorporate the UAE consensus targets into these submissions. Currently, national climate plans fall far short of what is needed. To drive meaningful change, government must set more ambitious, quantifiable, and actionable renewable energy targets in their national determined contributions. In parallel, global investment in renewable energy capacity surged to $570 billion in 2023, making a 27% increase from the previous year. However, these investments are heavily concentrated in certain regions leaving the Global South with financial accessibility gaps. For instance, while being one of the regions most affected by climate change, Africa received a mere 6% of global climate mitigation funding in 2022. This stark disparity not only exacerbates energy poverty, but also hinder the progress of billions striving for sustainable energy transition. To address these challenges, we must rethink our approach. Public financing must go beyond merely de-risking private capital and focus on direct investment, grant and subsidies that prioritize high-impact projects. These projects should assess broader benefits, including energy access, job creation, and climate resilience, even if they do not meet traditional bankability criteria. Instruments like risk mitigation funds and result-based financing can support vulnerable economies without increasing their debt burdens. In addition to financing, regional and cross-sectoral collaboration is an imperative. Climate action must transcend borders, leveraging shared knowledge. Distinguished Member of Parliament and honoured guests, as a legislator, you have the power to drive real change in renewable energy adoption. By strengthening legislative oversight to ensure accountability and establishing robust monitoring frameworks to track policy effectiveness, you can turn high-level commitment into real impact on the ground. Today's forum is designed to equip you with actionable insights and networks to accelerate progress toward the UAE consensus goals. Let us remember that achieving this goal is not just about meeting targets. It is about transforming our energy system and fostering sustainable growth, creating jobs, reducing emissions, and ensuring a just and inclusive energy transition powered by renewables. I hope to meet with you again at next year's forum in January 2026, after COP30 in Brazil, to commend your Parliament for their NDC submission aligned with the 1.5 Celsius target and the UAE consensus, and to prepare for the next critical phase, implementing these commitments. Together, you can lead the global energy transition and create a future defined by sustainability, inclusivity, and resilience. Thank you very much for your attention. And back to you, John.
Thank you, Director General. Thanks for the kind introduction. It's terrific. This is the perfect roundtable and discussion this morning because the NDCs and the role of the legislators over the next year for us to get it right. And also we saw the announcement this last week, in the last few days actually, about the warming, the warmest year on record in 2024. So it's also a just transition, as you said, but the sense of urgency is more than ever. I'd like to introduce to the table here Dr. Ali Al-Nuaimi. You all know him, of course. He's a member of the FNC in the UAE and Vice President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. You have a 10-minute introduction. We're looking forward to hearing from you about also the troika that's in place here, as the Director General was suggesting, through Brazil. So it was a very important 3-year window initiated by the UAE. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Well, here I'm not on behalf of the UAE. I'm on behalf of the IPU. It's different than last year, okay? Mr. Francisco La Camera, Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, honorable members of the Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to come and meet with you and speak with you on behalf of the IPU. You know, I did prepare a speech, but actually, you know, when my dear friend was talking, I was going through what he's saying. And where do we stand as member of parliament? We always blame government. We always at a position to debate, is this climate change a serious threat or not? But frankly, dear friends, as my friend stated, 2024 is the hottest on record. And we all know that this is non-reversible. Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, the president of COP28, when he did the opening, he said, we need action. We don't need negotiation. And with what's happening that we see ourselves, the floods, the storms, all these climate change impact on our life currently, we see that we as human beings now in different society, in all continent, we just suffer. And this is where we as member of parliament, we have to look our responsibility. Frankly, one of the most important sessions that we debate in our parliament with the government is the budget. And we allocate all the time to go into details related to the budget because we want to save the economy. But frankly, if we don't save the Mother Nature, we will not have an economy that we are enjoying or flourishing. What we are seeing now, that things are moving very fast, and we are busy with debating, looking into what's the reason. I think we have to understand this. What's happening is the impact of us as human beings. And we, as member of parliament, we have to look at the survival of humanity on this earth. Do we care about each other? His Excellency, he mentioned Africa as a continent who suffer mostly. Do we care about Africa? The damage that will happen to Africa is not limited because of climate change to Africa. It will spread later on. What we need now actually is not, endorsement of an agreement that will come from COP28 or COP29 or COP30 from our parliament. No. What we need actually is creating an ecosystem that care about humanity, that care about the future of our children and grandchildren. Debating a budget about how much is allocated for this program and that initiative, we always should hold the government responsible the impact of each initiative, of each program on the climate. Because it's not it's not that we are suffering now. We have to look into how our children and grandchildren, the next generation, and the price that's needed to deal with this threat now is much less than what will be needed after 10 or 20 or 30 years. So, what I think it's important for members of parliaments to step in, bear their responsibility about their society and about the global community, and to start thinking in a different way. There is challenges that you do in your parliament, with the government, with your local community, that's limited to that area. But when it's come to climate change, it's not. You will suffer. If you don't engage, you will suffer. You might be watching others suffering now in the Caribbean or the Pacific or in Africa. but 5, 10 years, you will start suffering. The heat that we face now in the summer in Europe is something that we are not used to. You know, when I was a kid, I used to go to London in the summer. It was raining all the summer. It was cold. We can't go out without a jacket. Now it's different. You can't live in a hotel without an air conditioning. And you will see this in all European cities. Things has changed. And this is where we need to create a culture. It's not only that those responsible for renewable energy that we should talk to, we should encourage, we should support. We have to change the culture within our society, our educational system. We want our kids to understand in the school, in grade 1, what's climate change, what their challenges, what's the threat, what's their responsibility in their behavior as kids also to counter this threat. We need to change the legislation in all initiatives, all programs, especially when dealing with the budget. Make sure how this program or this initiative contribute to climate change. Don't approve it unless there is a positive role that will add value. It's not a battle of your parliament or your community or your country. It's the humanity battle. We have to come together. We have to face it together. We have to engage in it together. We have to create a culture where this is a common responsibility. And this is where we have to engage with everyone who is willing to partner, to play a role, to counter this threat, to promote the renewable energy. Our European friend used to be the leading country in promoting and pushing for renewable energy. Now, because of the economic situation, we see some changes. This is where we have to come together as an international community to play a role that we care about each other. We care about the future of humanity. We care about the future of our children and grandchildren. And what we will do today will make a huge difference after 40, 50 years. If we don't, we will suffer and everyone will suffer. No one will be excluded from that. And this is where we need champion from member of parliament. Don't deal with it through budgeting. Don't deal with it as something within your national agenda priority. This is a humanity priority. This is something related to the future of all of us. We don't need only caring, we need engagement and action. We were happy with the Paris Agreement that all those countries signed in it. But what was the role of Parliament in it? Many, they pulled out. Many, they signed, but they didn't do anything. We need to hold our government responsible for what they signed. And this is where, we have to play a proactive role and engage and show that we care about everyone without excluding anyone. Unfortunately, when, I heard some of the debates in COP28 and also COP29, they say, look at Africa. Who will pay for Africa? It's our responsibility. It's the global responsibility. They suffer now. If we don't help them in stopping their suffering, we will suffer at the end. This is something, it's not a challenge, it's a serious threat to humanity. Either we suffer all, or we are saved all. And this is the culture that we need to create, to work on, and to promote in all sectors, with government, with NGO, with the private sector, with parliament, with everyone. We need everyone to be part of this without excluding anyone. but we want everyone to play a role that they are proud of, a role that it will add value, a role that will enable them to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Thank you very much.
Very passionate delivery there, Dr. Noemi. I saw you had a written speech, and as you said, you scrapped it immediately, and I thought it was a fantastic combination between the Director General, who laid out the power of legislators to drive change, and I think it's an excellent point. We're not trying to meet targets, as you suggested, Francesco, but we're building a new energy system for a just transition. But the fact that you said it's in protection of our planet, I think it's often forgotten in the roundtables and in the debates and the wider narrative around who's responsible for action, right? It's not the global north or the global south. It has to be glued together. And I really compliment ARENA for putting the NDCs as one of the primary roundtable discussions of what the legislators can do, because I think this is a connection that's missing. We have the overall arching themes, but when it comes down to the governments at the local level or at the national level, the connection is often not made. So thank you very much. I know you both have a very full agenda, so if you need to duck out, please do so. We have two fantastic roundtables. Just as a reminder, we have 2 hours together. So we're planning to spend an hour, almost an hour on each, and then we'll have an intervention from Ramon Mendez, who's going to be giving us a 10-minute speech about where we are today with NDCs and the fact that the transition is possible. I just want to have your interventions on each question I present, 3 minutes or less, and we've talked to each one of the panelists to do so. And we definitely want to open it up to the floor. So once we get through the roundtables at the end of each session, we'll try to take questions to the floor to make it as interactive as possible. So please be aware if I do give you a signal to wrap, to do so we can have as much dialogue as possible. Can we give another nice round of applause to Francesco and Dr. Noemi? Thank you for your contributions. And I'll go ahead and introduce our first set of panelists here. They're all to my left, and we've decided, because to enhance the dialogue, to keep everybody at their chairs, and then we can have a dialogue across the room in north and south and east and west, if you will, geographically in the room. Berbel Hon is the chair of the Global Renewables Congress from Hamburg. Miral Suwaidi is the member of the FNC here for the UAE. Great to see you again. Stefan Wenzel is the Parliamentary State Secretary for the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action in Germany. Welcome. And Berbel, we had a chance to meet this morning, so I'm going to go out of the formal question I had for you. But I think after the address from Francesco and Dr. Noemi, why don't we take a data check, if you will, to where we are today and NDCs, and you have a comparison from where we are in Germany, your home market, and where we are in terms of adoption and implementation of capacity in Africa. And Berbel asked to start there because she said, I think we need a reality check on where we are today, the percentage increases we've seen the last couple of years, and what needs to happen. Do you want to start there, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Yes, I had a look at the data of ARENA, and I could see that it's a huge job we have to do in Africa to reach the goal of Africa that was 300 gigawatt in 2030. That was a decision in 2023 at the pre-COP in Kenya. And we had in 2023, we had only 62 gigawatt in Africa, in whole Africa. To compare it with Germany, we had at the time 170 gigawatt in Germany, so only a small country with 84 inhabitants, again 1.2 billion people in Africa. And that means to come from 62 gigawatt to 300 gigawatt, that means not only triple renewables, but not only 4 times, but nearly 5 times. You know, so it's a lot of work to do in Africa. But I'm optimistic because we have no time for pessimism, you know. So we have to start in Africa, and we have some advantages. For example, photovoltaic has no cost, very low costs. So we can build up. And John, you told I'm the chair of the Global Renewable Congress. That's a network of parliamentarians. And our work is to bring parliamentarians together and look for an exchange of good ideas. Because we can see in Africa that we have different countries. Some are really front runners, and others, maybe they have to have a look how can they optimize their positions. And parliamentarians have a very important role at this time because they are the bridge between the local level and the national level. So they can look for overcoming blockades or obstacles and bring forward renewables. And that is very important to look for something like prosperity plans. How can we create jobs with renewables, with energy? Because energy for itself is nothing. But to do something with energy, that's what we have to do. To reach, for example, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We can't be successful without electricity, you know? So, for example, low-hanging fruits are water pumps, or industrial hubs, or cooling systems, or doing more of your harvest, drying it, or something like that, or with some mills. So I think this prosperity plans, create jobs, overcome hunger and poverty, that must be the goal of parliamentarians. And we have some ideas of financing it, but maybe that's the next question or the next debate we can have.
Actually, if you don't mind, I'll follow up quickly because I appreciate you giving us an update on the data. What are some of the more creative cross-border financing innovations that we can address here? I know you wanted to list this as a top topic, so why don't we get there? And I think you have a very different spin on the role, or the very different analysis on the role of the youth and local entrepreneurs in solving the problem. So part of it is the infrastructure of climate financing and reducing the risk for Africa or some of the developing countries in Asia and in South America. They're all represented here today. But what are some of the innovations on climate finance and the role of entrepreneurs in each country to jumpstart that funding? Do you want to address that?
Yeah, I think we need private capital because we need such a lot of money that we can't do it only with donation. And so we have to make a mix. Maybe, for example, from the German government, but also from others, we were talking about result-based financing. And that means a model that you have donation, you have private capital, and at the end you are working together with the local entrepreneurs. Because it's not the right way to invest with European money or North American money and invest all of that in Africa. We have to make it together with the economy and with the companies in Africa together, because we have to look for the maintenance. That's not only investing the money, but we have to look for sustainability. What's about this investment in 10 years or in 20 years? So that means a good maintenance. And we can only do that with a knowledge, the local knowledge. What's very interesting, we talked about that is a Mission 300. So because the World Bank decided, together with the African Development Bank, together with the Rockefeller Foundation, together with the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, to give 300 million people in Africa access to electricity till 2030. And the role of parliamentarians must be, what are the circumstances of this mission, what is the benefit for the different countries? And I think that's a debate we have to talk about, because at the end, it must be a benefit for the people. And not only investing money, but a benefit for the people, So, yes, we are very interested. I will join the conference in Dar es Salaam in 10 days, so we can debate about how to do it. But so it's so important to look from the local level. That's my experience. I was 10 years minister in North Rhine-Westphalia, the biggest state in Germany. I was 12 years member of parliament, the national parliament. But the goal must be that the situation of the people are better, because we are talking about climate change and climate protection, but that's not only climate protection, it's a protection of humanity. You know, the climate will stay even if the humans are not there. You know, so we have to look for our benefits, for our lives, for our children and our grandchildren.
Great. What a fantastic discussion this morning so far. Thank you, Barbel. Mira Al-Suwaidi, I think when we use the case study of the UAE and the structure that I made reference to a little bit earlier about the troika between the UAE, Azerbaijan, and of course in COP30 for Brazil. But there's a target here, and it's often overlooked because you think of the UAE and the consensus of COP28, but the national priorities of reducing emissions by 47% by 2035. This country is a major oil and gas producer. It's trying to use that for export and then develop its own renewable capacity to service the needs of society here. But how do you make sure you can advance the renewable energy mandate in the UAE at the legislative level and hit that target of 47% in a short time frame? That's 10 years from now. Please, thanks.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Irina for this opportunity and for inviting me again to come speak during the assembly. Like Dr. Adi said, I had something written based on what the discussions that we had, but I decided to put that aside and just mention a couple of things maybe before we get into
No, I was going to say, it becomes infectious because I noticed Barbel did the same thing. So it's for a better dialogue. That's what I was suggesting. So thank you very much, Mira.
I think just a couple of things to keep in mind. One thing Dr. Adi said is, during his keynote speech, is we need to start ensuring that we have behavioral change from a young age, as young as grade 1, to create a common responsibility. And I think you also mentioned that as well. The role of MPs is to ensure that we all have a common responsibility in addressing and providing solutions that reaches all, inclusivity for all. And when we look at the UAE, there's one thing that's very important to know. Who remembers when Masdar started? Does anyone remember? It was 2006. I was very young. Who knew what renewable energy was in 2006? Who was talking about it? When the UAE started talking about renewable energy in 2006, I remember people calling us crazy. I remember it very clearly. Because why would an oil-rich nation even think about renewable energy, especially when it was so expensive and so new? But if you look at our history and you look at how we are formed as a nation, it's not something that was new to us, because we have already been a very conservative country. Our late president, Sheikh Zayed, the founder of the UAE, actually stopped flaring. He had a zero routine flaring process for natural gas burning that was associated with oil production. Very early on, when the UAE was formed, he started to instill that discipline. So we, as a nation, already have that in us. It's not something that was new to us. And when we look at it, we're a young country. We're a small, young country by age, and also young by population, and small by population. But we do have a clear vision. We do have leadership, and we have strong legislative frameworks that allowed us to move from a country that is 100% dependent on hydrocarbons to a country that is now, today, less than 30% dependent on hydrocarbons. That has a large impact from renewable energy and from other clean sources of energy, and ensuring that we continue to have clean sources of energy within our energy mix. Now, when we look at what are the different measures and ambition that we had and how we were able to drive this change as a young country and as a small country, the first thing that we need to look at is how did we start to assess and put in place our clean energy targets. We have a Clean Energy Strategy 2050 that states that 50% of our energy mix will come from clean sources, and a big aspect of that will be dependent on renewable energy. So how do we get that, and how do we make it happen? Of course, Masdar is one of the areas that we do that, and everyone is familiar with Masdar. Masdar is not only a name that is known in the UAE, but Masdar is a name that's known internationally for its projects. Other examples that help us achieve our clean energy targets are the Riyadh facility, which is the region's first commercial scale carbon capture project, which captures 800,000 tons of CO2 annually. Another thing that's important with renewable energy is legislation. Like you said, financing is very important and funding is very important, and private sector and private investments are extremely important. So legislation to support private investments of renewable energy. One example is the Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Solar Park in Dubai. This was built under an IPP structure, which is the Independent Power Producer structure. And another thing that's important for us, me as an MP, and also looking at legislation and how we improve legislation, is the fast approvals that are required for renewable energy projects. We have implemented in the UAE a fast track for projects that are related to renewable energy in order to facilitate this infrastructure build out. For example, in Dubai, you have the Shams project, which allows you to install solar panels on your rooftops, and all the necessary guidelines and approvals have been put in place to expedite that and do it in a seamless manner, to encourage people, to include people, to make sure that we actually start implementing this. Incentives. Incentives are very important because it's still, I would say, quite new. Net metering policies to allow people to actually install these solar panels, and then if they have excess energy produced, they can sell it back to the grid. And I think that's very important to promote fast adaptation of rooftop solar in our part of the region. A supportive legal framework. We have adopted in the UAE Green Building Codes, as well as we have set up a bureau, and this bureau is basically to oversee all renewable energy projects, but also to ensure that we comply with international standards, because we cannot do things alone. We have to make sure that we are complying with all different international standards. Now, what I talked about is what the UAE has been doing locally, but when we look at internationally, there are different things that we have done. COP28, we launched Altera, which is to mobilize $250 billion by 2030, and $50 billion that is specifically dedicated to the Global South Climate Action. And these are just a few examples, but there are so many more ways that we have worked locally and internationally. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Mariam. We can come back in the second round to get into the international connections. I was honored to chair the Algeria dialogues a month ago, and the deployment of capital, private capital, to push along the transition in the developing world is important. So if you can circle back to address it, that would be fantastic. Terrific interventions so far. I'm going to call on Stefan Weissel. Berbel made the case in point here about Germany and the growth that we've seen now, so there's a great deal of momentum. But Stefan, if you can address the NDCs and how do you make sure NDCs link to climate justice, which I think is very interesting, and to the DG's point about making sure that there's just transition, which is also often disconnected from parliamentarians, that the actions that you make at home also represent the voice and the planet as well. Can you address that, the planetary responsibilities for each legislature, and to make sure it is a just transition at the same time? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, John, and thank you very much for the invitation in this forum and to speak together and discuss together. It's a crucial point you mentioned. We decided in Dubai that we want to double efficiency and triple renewable, and we wanted the transition away from fossil fuel. And so last year, in 2023, we saw all over the world 560 gigawatt of implementation of new renewable power plants, mostly wind and solar, because wind and solar is almost the cheapest opportunity to produce electricity all over the world. But 60% of this investments going to China and only 1 or 2% going to African continent. And we have still about 600 or 800 million people without electricity. But there we have the option today to build off-grid solutions with renewables to reach every remote island, to reach every remote village all over the world. We can create local grids with storage options to use the sun on the day, and with the batteries and the storage we can use the electricity in the night too, and the wind we have on night and on day. And we must bring the balance to the grids, to the local grids, to the national grids, and we need also interconnectors to connect the different countries of the region to have a resilient grid, which is then much stronger for everybody who is connected. And so it's we have a lot more opportunities to have a just transition. And we must keep an eye very strong on these social issues, because this is a very important point to implement such a future energy system for a society which have the big majority of all people living in this country. So the social points are very, very important. And even the communication. I think that 50% is communication of the effort, and 50% is finance, is technology, and is good governance. And so let's keep an eye on these social issues, because we need climate justice. That means that everybody all over the world can use renewable energy, and that is now the cheapest possibility to feed your children, to for mobility, for housing, for cooling food, and everything what you have to do all over the day. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Can I ask a quick follow-up? It's very interesting because I've been involved with ARENA, I think now for a dozen years, and we had a public-private sector dialogue before where we had CEOs sitting across from legislators such as yourselves, and they were saying there is a business case for this. And Stefan, you made a very profound comment saying that half of this is communications. And do you think German society is aware that the low-cost options are now solar and wind? And do they know there's $85 billion going into battery storage, which is really interesting, right? Because we're here today, and it's competitive, and it's about deployment. And then you suggest that, we need the financing for the global south and that sort of responsibility. Can you explain, in German society, are they aware of the change that's taken place and the growth that Berbel and your good self have talked about?
Yes, I think that we still have a lot of discussions about what the best solutions for the future of our energy supply. But when we see to the COP28, and we see that all nations all over the world decide to double efficiency, to triple renewable, that was also a decision what was driven by the economical situation, because it's known that this is the best way to serve the supply of the need of the world, and also that what we need to reduce our emissions to zero. Because when we look to loss and damage, every country has always can explain about big damage they had because of strong rainfalls or different extremely weather situations of very all over the world. And so we have now the instruments, we have the technology, we must implement it. And it's what Bärbel also said, and what was very impressive also from VAE for me, we need public money and we need private money. We have to have a regulatory framework where it's possible to invest and to have a return on invest too. And on the other hand, we need private money for guarantees, for planning security, and to support countries with higher interest rates or high inflation, where it's not so easy to get a credit if you go into the bank. And there we need the public money, the support even for the emerging countries and the developing countries.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Brabell, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation and then come to Mira, but I wanted to open the floor to flag our youth representative that's here. And I didn't want to surprise you. So at the end of the second round, I'd love to hear, because the connection that we've made, and you said it yourself, Brabell, in your opening comments, the entrepreneurs and the youth, we have to keep them in mind for the future. So I'll come to you thereafter. Dennis, it's great to see you joining us. Thank you very much. Representative from Uganda, so we'll bring him into the conversation as well. Brabell, what are some of, picking up on Stefan's points here, what are some of the innovative approaches to climate financing that we see at the national level? And if you don't mind addressing with your global hat with Global Renewables Congress, the innovative solutions to reduce the cost of capital in Africa as well, because this is one of the major barriers. Interest rates are high. The role of the regional development banks and the international development banks and institutions to lower the cost of capital, give credit guarantees and currency exposure guarantees to make sure we can deploy as fast as possible to the developing world. Do you want to address both, please? Thank you.
Yes, that's one of the most important questions, because when we have the solution, we can go forward, you know. I think one of the main points is that the private capital needs some secure. So they would like to have their money back, you know, and that means they need a stable situation, a stable economy in the countries, and you know, they must trust in the markets. And for example, one of the points we can see in different countries is that one of the very important points is a tariff. What is the price of electricity in different countries? Because many of the African countries, so I have a better overview of Africa than on other continents. Many countries in Africa, they decide for social tariffs. I think that's important because it's political, and it's important because people who need only some kilowatt hours, you know, per year, so they don't have to pay so much. But if you don't have to pay for electricity, nobody will come and invest, because they would like to have a return of their investments. And then sometimes in other countries we see a higher price of electricity. So that means, for example, more energy efficiency, and also to have the decision of maybe, as Stefan talked about, the decentralized solution, the off-grid solutions, so to talk with the people in a village, what are your costs now? You have to pay for diesel, you have to pay for kerosene, you have to pay for petrol, you have to pay for candles, and then count all of this money together and then say maybe the tariff of the electricity is higher than the government will say, but the people in the village can use this cost because it's less than they have to pay now. You know, that's so have more freedom for investments, have more freedom for decisions, for example, in the villages. And very important, to include the women, because without the women, we will not come forward in Africa. We need the women as a part of the solution for the development in Africa. And the women will have a benefit when we are investing in small systems. For example, solar home systems. I saw such a lot of very proud women who had this solar home system, had a charger at the wall, and then can have a small income and put this income, for example, for the training of the children, you know? So the women are investing in the future of a country. And for example, I talked with a person from a company who was selling the solar home systems, and he said, we are making only contracts with women. And I said, why? Yes, we can trust the women that they are paying the money back, you know? So I think it's important to look of the impact of the investment for the people. And as I said, most important is productive use. If you are investing in electricity and have a better income because of that, create jobs, combine it with training, that is the future. So maybe first looking for low-hanging fruits, you know, more income, more overcome hunger and poverty, and then maybe take the next steps.
Thank you, Burbell. Mr. Okuzu, I'll bring you in right after I go to the second round with Mira Al-Sawadi, just to make sure you're prepared, and then I'll bring the youth conversation into it. Thank you very much for the direct answers and the great contributions so far. Mira, I was wondering if we could pick up on post-COP28 and the UAE consensus and the structure that was established with the Troika. How do you make sure that the legislative agenda for the NDCs are everlasting, right? And then they move the needle in the developing world. You started to bring up the idea of the investment fund and some of the international initiatives, like in Altera. I mean, deployment here, they're trying to rally $35 billion going to $200 billion between now and 2030. Very ambitious, but is that part of the effort to connect legislation to the international cause and deployment of capital as well, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to start with one thing. One thing that we mentioned is also like how members of parliament work with different governments and to ensure like legislation is put in place. When COP28 happened here, it was the first time the parliamentary meeting was in COP and not on the sidelines of COP. So that started the inclusion discussion of where is the role of MPs and where does Parliament work with government, especially when it comes to the climate agenda. So at COP28, it was the first time that the parliamentary meeting was held in COP in the Green Zone with over 500 MPs attending and the largest number of speakers in attendance. So that's something that we're very proud of, and it continued on. We set the precedent, and it continued on in Azerbaijan. Now, when we talk about the international side and when the UAE launched Altera during COP28, like I mentioned, the main purpose of Altera was to mobilize 250 billion by 2030 and 50 billion specifically dedicated to the Global South climate action. What we have done is we've created different legislative frameworks that enable green financing and international climate investing. So the UAE created the Climate Tech Hub, which is to basically accelerate clean technology adoption. Also different green financing mechanisms that will be used to catalyze investments across emerging markets, and public-private partnership legislation that helps to unlock new funding streams. Now, going back to this green financing mechanism, we know that we launched as a UAE as well $4.5 billion committed to renewable energy projects in Africa. And now that we've discussed Africa, the key thing to note here is to ensure accountability. Now, you mentioned something very important, that when we invest, especially in Africa, is that when we're looking at renewable energy projects, these are not only projects, these are investments, and they require a return on investment. And when we put our money into different, and we deploy our capital into different jurisdictions, it's not free money. We need to make sure that these are sound investments that are sustainable and that will reach the people. And that is extremely important for us. And inclusion of women is obviously very important. I was just looking up a figure when you were speaking. According to the World Bank, women own approximately 58% of all MSMEs, small and medium businesses in Africa. That is extremely powerful. 58%. There is no way that that can be done without inclusion, without making sure that the women are part of the discussion, because they are also the ones that are teaching the children, that are ensuring the next generation is aware, is able to adapt these measures, and to ensure sustainability and continuity. Thank you.
Excellent example, and that's my experience when going to Africa, by the way. Whether it's North, East, West, or South Africa, the women are phenomenal entrepreneurs and very ingenious in terms of setting up those micro businesses. I wanted to open the floor before I bring in the legislator from Uganda. Is there any other comments before you want to go? But this is a very healthy debate, and it's actually concrete in its outlook. So congratulations on forming this group together.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, it looks like it.
But unfortunately, I have to go.
That's what I thought. Okay, nice to see you. Thank you, Francesco, for that. Mr. Okuzu, I know there's a commitment in Uganda to triple renewable electric generation capacity to 4,200 megawatts by 2030 as part of the NDC. What are the specific regulatory frameworks that you're setting up and the policy frameworks that need to be implemented for that to happen? And let's try to bridge that gap. Are you getting the financing that's necessary for that implementation? Please. You weren't here for our earlier briefing, but we're having the interventions of 3 minutes or less. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I'm a legislator from Uganda. Indeed, we've set a very clear vision on universal access and increasing generation by 2030, and that involved putting in place enabling environment, one of which has been our Vision 2040 and the National Development Plans. Those have clearly stipulated what must be done, and at all times we have to ensure the budget is aligned to that vision. The Uganda government has also in its investment code stipulated what investors will get as incentives when they invest in the power sector. Our power purchase agreements have been crafted in such a way we take care of deemed energy. That tends to de-risk the projects. So there are moments you generate more than we can consume, and usually the government pays for that. We've been able to streamline our land cessing regime. Unlike in other places, it's very bureaucratic. So we have streamlined how people apply for licenses, and that tends to speed up the process and attract investments. Uganda has also been able to do pre-feasibility studies, those initial costs, which many investors do not want to take up because of the uncertainty. So we've done pre-feasibility studies and put this data out to get investments. We have also done targeted investments in rural areas, especially areas that are far from the grid, in islands, in deeply rural populations. Uganda has been able to put some investments in mini grids and off grids, and that has helped us increase generation. In 2010, we had a capacity of about 595 megawatts. As we talk now, we are now in 2047 megawatts. So we are en route achieving that target. The drivers have been clarity of the vision. And of course, I wouldn't hesitate to talk about the political stability, relative political stability, because if you are always fighting and there are wars, you will find investors get derailed and they will not be able to invest in the sector. Of course, there are incentives to deal with the issues of demand risk, and government has come in to subsidize access, and because of that, investors also find it easy to put their money knowing there will be demand for what they produce. So in terms of initiatives undertaken by the government to meet the targets, those are things we've been able to do.
Thank you very much. It's super clear. If I can follow up very quickly, can you achieve universal access? The latest data suggests that those that live in urban centers, it's almost 95 to 98% access to energy on a consistent basis. And if you look at some parts of Africa, it's 56 to 60% access to energy. So do you want to use the Uganda example for us to share? Can you get universal access throughout the country? Because you talked about the rural investment. Thank you.
Thank you. In 2017, our coverage was about 24%. Right now, it stands at 53%, and there have been initiatives to ensure there's equity and distribution across Universal. What the government is doing is to invest in the distribution infrastructure, because we know the private sector may not take up some of those costs, so we have deliberately invested in infrastructure. We also subsidizing, and there are certainly incentives. Initiatives in energy efficiency that is to ensure many parts which are not getting access actually have access. We are engaged in bringing down cost of electricity. The government is renegotiating some of the loans and investments. All that is to bring costs down so that we can take power to different areas that have not been served. The cost is sometimes prohibitive. The people in town can be able to afford, while the village people may not be able to afford. So also government has to step in to support that process to ensure access in those areas and equity in distribution.
Excellent. Thanks. That was not one of our set questions, but I really appreciate you addressing it because it's one of the critical issues in Africa today. I didn't get the name of our youth representative from ARENA this year, but I'm going to open the floor to you. Can you self-introduce? And just keep in mind that our interventions are 3 minutes or less. And then to kind of forewarn our panel, we've got through our kind of formal and informal comments here. But I'm just going to ask you for your final comments in the next round of things that you thought we might have left out that you think is crucial to enter into the next roundtable as well. So I'll come back to you after our youth representative, please. Thanks.
Thank you so much, moderator. I'm so happy to be with you all here in this room. My name is Asma Robhia. I'm from Tunisia, and I'm part of IRENA Youth Council. So thank you for the opportunity to address you today on behalf of IRENA Youth Council, an initiative that reflects IRENA's commitment to youth empowerment and meaningful youth engagement in advancing global energy transition. The Youth Council has a 2-year mandate. We work closely with the IRENA team, with DG Francesco Lacamera, and the members of the council come from different countries, backgrounds, and organizations, and we share a common passion for advancing renewable energy, adoption, climate action, and the empowerment of young people and their communities. So as a young person actively involved in the energy transition, I'm dedicated to leading youth inclusion in the NDC review process in my country, Tunisia, and I work closely with our government. And this experience has been very inspiring for me to see the dedication of young people, and then also the ambition and the commitment from our government to include young people. So I'd love to see this expanding to other countries as well. I know many countries are doing a great job in terms of including youth in the NDC review process. And we want to ensure that the updated NDCs are not only equitable and ambitious, but also engaging young people and including young people. So in terms of youth engagement with parliamentarians and legislators, we would love to see institutionalizing youth engagement. So for example, in Tunisia, we are formalizing youth participation in the NDC review process, and legislators can build on such examples by mandating youth representation in national climate bodies, ensuring their involvement in designing, implementing, and monitoring NDC commitment. Also, community-led solutions, education, workforce development. I heard a lot of interventions focusing on also youth, like entrepreneurship in general and financing mechanisms. So we would love to see you putting more effort in that. And maybe I would love to close my intervention and say that we would love or want legislators to see us as their partners and not just like as beneficiaries. We want to be like key stakeholders in the table and be included in the design and implementation of policies. I know there are many inspiring stories from different countries present with us here today and also other countries who are not present. So would love to see more collaboration and you meaningfully engaging young people and seeing that it is crucial to engage young people. So we have at the margins of IRENA Assembly the IRENA Youth Forum under the title The New Generation of Decision Makers, because we do not consider ourselves as the next generation. We are the new generation. We are the present. So we want to have a seat at the table with you and work closely with you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for the very clear presentation as well. If I can ask you a quick follow-up, there was quite a bit of debate and frustration for the loss and damage fund, right? So they landed on $300 billion, but we were expecting for something 4 times bigger. Can you share an honest assessment from the youth standpoint in the new generation, as you said, not the next, but the new generation? I'll have to remember that. Do you get frustrated that, and this is not pointed at the legislatures in the room, but in general, that the sense of urgency for action, Dr. Naimi made a very impassioned opening session comment here about it is protecting our planet, and he said he was worried about the next generations, his children and the grandchildren. What is your view? Can you share it so people understand the urgency of your generation to take action swiftly?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. Yes, we are frustrated. That's true. Even though young people do participate at COP and participate even in the negotiations, but we are frustrated from the outcomes of COP. And personally, like coming from Tunisia, like my country suffers from water scarcity, which is one of the very evident impacts of climate change. And when I go back to my hometown, we do not have like access to water. Like we have it like for just 1 hour per day. And when I always go back there, it really impacts my like my work, for example, or my daily activities. So it's something that's really impacting our lives and as young people, and it's not like equitable across different countries. So we really want countries to be accountable for their actions and also to raise awareness among communities, because we are impacted by this, and I believe certain countries are impacted more than others, and some will be impacted more in the future, as Dr. Ali mentioned in his intervention. So we want everyone to be aware and accountable. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the questions. As I promised to our roundtable here, I wanted to get your final interventions, and I'm not going to guide the question. If there's anything else is on your mind, because we have 5 minutes left, Mira, Barbel, Stefan, Dennis, I'd love to hear from you in terms of the key issues that lie ahead as you see for the NDCs this year, right? So I'll leave the floor open. Barbel, would you like to start in terms of, you covered creative financing, you talked about some of the data here. What do you think is the most urgent issue to address here as we round out the first half of our session?
You know, if we talk about the NECs, we have to talk about the role of parliamentarians. That is here the debate, and I would say it's very important to have something like a decision of ambitious goals. So, for example, we did it in Germany, that we said, okay, if you would like to reach in 2030, I would say 300 gigawatt in whole Africa, what does it mean for my country? And if you have the number for your country, then you can say, okay, we would like to reach it. And then you can say, what do we have to reach in every year? And if you are not successful for the first year, you must be more ambitious for the next year. So you have a plan, how can you change with instruments, you know? So, and that means establishing a political framework to overcome obstacles. What's about the obstacles? What's about the barriers? And what can you make, for example, with carbon prices or tax or, as I said, tariffs, you know, or concessions? There are some instruments, and you can look what is the best situation for your country and how can you be more successful. And on the other side, I think it's very important to look for sector coupling. Not only look for access to electricity, but also what's about what's about the transport sector, what's about the heating and cooling sector. And combine all of this, and then look for benefits. For benefits, as I said, prosperity plans, so that the people are proud of to be part of the development. Maybe the most important point in Germany was, as Stefan told, the most important point was that we as parliamentarians decided to stay together over all parties and said we have the same goal, to increase renewables, you know, and that we found a way with this feed-in tariff system that we could, that the whole population could participate, you know. So we have 1 million and even more of this small balcony solar systems. So everybody is proud to produce electricity for itself, you know. So I have an app and I can show you what's about my solar system at home. What does it work? What's about our e-car, you know? So, and I am proud to be a prosumer, to produce electricity and consume electricity. And if you have such a movement, you know, if you have such an idea for the whole population, you can be successful.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, a prosumer. Is that what you said? Prosumer. It's excellent. I've never heard that before. I also wanted to open the floor up to, not from the panelists for the next session, but if there's any other interventions that want to be, either tilt your placard here or just give us a signal and we'll do so. We're a little bit tight on time to wrap up. Stefan, one of the issues you raised as a formal talking point was how do legislatures link youth to the NDCs? We've heard from Asma for the Youth Council. Did you want to put that as part of your final analysis? And then Mira and Dennis will hear from you.
Yes, thank you very much, John. I think that is a very important point because it's the young generation who must be have the chance to go in these processes and to have to learn how to do and how to act and how what possibilities they have to act in a parliament, how they can bring a decision to the government. And so we tried to integrate the youth generation, and we financed a secretary for youth organizations, where 30 youth organizations have a secretary to get support for example, to visit conferences like this, or to go to the COP and to see what happens there, how it's working, what we have to do, what we have to learn, what are the skills we need to implement energy policy in our countries. And that was very interesting, that we have a lot of young people who are using this tool to learn and to bring information to their members of their own platforms. And that is one example which we use to integrate the young generation as early as possible. And schools are also very important to get informations and to learn about future energy and planning and options. And on the other hand, we implement also the Germans' International Climate Initiative. This is a funding program of the German government to promote climate action and biodiversity conservation in partner countries. And throughout its portfolio, the IKI supports governments to institutionalize youth engagement into their line of work. Over 60 IKI projects focus on integrating and empowering young people, including from marginalized communities, by raising awareness through capacity development or via direct involvement in policy-making processes.
Okay, Stefan, thanks very much. Sorry, I was getting up to get a handheld mic, so thank you for giving me that. And I'm glad you were able to address the youth. Dennis, before I come to you, the gentleman you had from Uganda, one of your colleagues has his placard up, please. We're keeping interventions from the floor from 2 minutes or less, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Lawrence Songa, the chair of the Climate Change Committee in Parliament of Uganda. And I want to thank Honorable Lee for the intervention, and also happy to see Honorable Rosa from Canada and Babel, and we have been talking about this for some time. Now, let me talk about the renewable energy. The question we keep asking, some people keep asking is, when I'm using fuel wood, what do I transition from? And then, but on the Ugandan side, we have signed and ratified the Paris Agreement. We have updated our NDC from 22% to 24.7%. We have developed our energy transition plan, green growth strategy, and also we have all the renewable energy policies. But the position of Uganda is still on the energy mix, but along that line, we are also making some electric buses, motorcycles. We have also removed the value-added tax on LPG and solar panels. The challenge still remains. We have not removed the value-added tax on cylinders, making still getting those LPG expensive. But also we have not removed the value-added tax on materials for making the batteries. On the climate finance, we now have the nationally designated entity. We have also the Climate Change Act in place. In the Act, we have provided for a certificate that should be issued to show that there is substantial amount of money in the budgets of the ministries, departments, and agencies. And also, we provided for reports by the Minister for Finance and also Minister for Water and Environment every year to show us how much money was put in the budget to address climate change and how much was sent to the grassroots, to the local government. Now, the general challenge is that if you look at the monies allocated globally for renewable energy, only 2% reach Africa, including Uganda, where people say Africa is at great risk of climate change, so countries should pool money. Once the money is put in the pool, again, there is that statement that it is very risky to invest this money in Africa. And the challenge along that line is because of the credit rating. Unless the issue of credit rating is addressed, we are not going to see a lot of climate finance flowing to Africa to address some of these challenges we are talking about. So I think this is my intervention.
Excellent intervention, by the way. Thank you very much. This idea of lifting the VAT on LPG and renewables is actually terrific. Dennis, did you want to weigh in very quickly? Because I'm going to go to the back row here. Thanks.
Yeah, I think going forward, we need to, in my view, involve the people. I see this effort has been largely by government at the top. The people are not part of the process. So if we start to engage them and they appreciate why we should make an effort to meet our targets, they will be able to play a role. Two, I think there should be a focus on the environment. If we do not balance the environment with meeting the energy needs, there will be a mismatch and investments could be targeted in a wrong direction.
Good. For example, the other request here, not to interrupt you, but Lawrence, was they want to see that the money that's been allocated by the budget actually ends up in renewable capacity generation. Is that possible to have that transparency?
I think he raises an important point. Right now, Uganda is developing its is trying to extract oil from the ground to meet some of its energy needs. But if we had a lot of support from the developed world, we would reconsider some of those issues, strike a balance. But because we do not get the needed help to invest in the renewables, we are forced to tap. So it's about balancing our energy needs with those other environmental issues and what he raises. And I think lastly for me, is walking the talk. These policies, these agreements, these what have been ratified, the papers are everywhere. But the people charged with the responsibility must walk the talk. The financiers, the governments, the people, everyone must play their part and ensure what is on the paper is put to action if we are to meet those global targets.
Great. Okay, I'm going to have to park it there, but thank you for the interventions. As you said,
lastly, maybe one of the interventions we've had in Uganda to achieve equity is the connection boxes. I just thought I should. There are places that do not have connection in the house and what they have not done connections in the house, but there is a box which government gives.
Interesting.
Exactly. So that gives you access to electricity without you connecting, like doing connection inside.
So it's for the
house.
rural countries,
it's
rural residents.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect.
Right.
You had your hand up. Very, very quick intervention behind you here. Sorry. I've got to be careful I don't call in all the Ugandans because it's not just but you had your hand up here. Thanks.
Thank you.
And then we'll go to Larnie, then I'm going to close this session, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
just
giving me
2 minutes or less, please. Thanks.
For giving me the floor. My name is Hans-Josef Fell, former member of the German Parliament from 1998 until 2013. I want to highlight the importance of legislators. We founded the Renewable Energy Act, the famous Feed-in Tariff Act in 2000 in Germany, from the Parliament without any proposal from the government. This is important because you can do a lot. And we could see how such a law could work successful. And this is a point what I want to highlight with you. We have a lot of laws in the world, but only very few laws really are successful. We need in climate protection exponential growth rates. That means doubling every 2 years, but only very few countries have such doubling growth rates, like China, like Uganda, like Costa Rica, but the rest not in the world. This means look to the laws. What is a basic principle that a law can stimulate exponential growth rates? For example, when you have laws that have a cap for yearly investment, there cannot be an exponential growth rate because of the cap. You must remove all caps, or you must bring feed-in tariffs that are really successful. We have the experience in Germany when we switched from the successful feed-in tariff law to an auctioning system, then the investment into renewables collapsed nearly. And we excluded the community power, the private people, the people on who were involved in that. So look to that. And my advice is for IRENA or any other one, make an overview over the laws that are existing in the world and identify the successful law and identify the not successful law for a proposal for all parliamentarians to go this way.
Thank you very much. So this goes very much into the one size does not fit all, right? It should go case by case, country by country. Thank you very much. That's not an easy task to do that scanning, but it's a worthy one. And the same thing as we talked about, Lawrence, on the VAT, if you have to incentivize certain sectors for distribution, then that would be a very rapid way to deal with it. Larnie Roque, please, very quickly. Thanks.
Yes, hello. My name is Larnie Roque, a representative from the House of Representatives of the Philippines. My warmest greetings and a pleasant morning to everyone present here today in the 15th Arena Legislators Forum. I'm very grateful to taking part of this forum, which brings high-ranking officials and policymakers from all over the world to promote efforts to fight the adverse effects of climate change. Its devastating effects are causing loss of lives and damage to our property. Our country, the Philippines, is shown to be one of the most vulnerable of its effects, which include, among others, extreme flooding, even in highly elevated areas, caused by stronger typhoons and warmer than normal temperature during the summer seasons, which could be very unbearable. Thankfully, there are things we can do to combat its effects. For our part, the Philippines initiated various efforts to fight climate change. Among these are pushing for sustainable living and sustainable development across the economy. Likewise, increasing renewable energy as a power source is sought. Through the Department of Energy, Renewable Energy Management Bureau, policies have been formulated and promulgated in pursuit of this. We are very blessed and fortunate to be with an abundant supply of renewable sources of energy, which we seek to utilize. While this is primarily geared towards our shift to a clean and sustainable source of power, we also believe that this will give us reliable and affordable power. In recent years, several measures have been enacted, such as Republic Act number 11234, also known as the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop Act, which encourages investments in the sector through an improved ease of doing business index, and Republic Act number 11285, also known as the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, which promotes the efficient use of power and likewise promotes the use of renewable energy technologies to optimize the use of power resources. Presently, the legislative branch, specifically the House of Representatives, has also deliberated on measures towards this end. The development of energy storage systems throughout the country is being tackled to address the intermittence of renewable energy. The establishment of renewable energy parks are also being considered, and through its Joint Congressional Energy Commission, the implementation of laws and regulations pertaining to our renewable energy sector has been strictly monitored. And with this, I look forward to a productive forum filled with knowledge sharing which will lead us all to action in this fight against the climate change. Truly, unity will bring us closer to our goal of a better tomorrow, not only for us, but especially so for the future generations. Thank you very much and good morning.
Thank you very much, Larnie. And this, first and foremost, I want to thank this roundtable for being so open and spontaneous. It's great to hear from the youth. The Uganda interventions were terrific. The analysis on what legislature should do as a re-scoping of their laws on the books and what could have the biggest impact. And to hear from the Philippines as well, in the eye of the storm, if you will, because it's had some major shocks and that they're not limited to Southeast Asia, as we've seen. I'm a Californian from Southern California, and to view the veracity of the climate change-driven fires is pretty extraordinary, to say the least. It's the real deal, as Dr. Noemi and Francesco said. I'd like to welcome Ramon Mendez. He's a former National Secretary of Energy for Uruguay and also served for the country in climate change, is now with the think group Ivy. Ramon, can we give him a warm welcome? He's going to speak from the podium, I believe. Thank you very much. Ramon, just to make sure that the microphones are on, let's make sure they're pressed. And it's 10 minutes or less. Is that working? Go ahead and test it.
Yeah, hello. Yeah,
you're okay. If we can
Okay.
raise the volume a little bit. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you so much for the invitation, for being here. Thank you. I mean, what I expected to share with you today is that things changed dramatically in the last years. And nowadays, with no doubt, renewables are the best option for your constituencies. And let me try to show this just with my example, the example of my country. You know that Uruguay is one of the smallest countries in South America with fantastic climate condition, natural resources, but we did a dramatic transition in the energy sector the last years. 15 years ago, we were really in a nightmare. We were having very strong difficulties in our energy sector, and it was an incredible opportunity in order to make changes. Uruguay has no proven resources of any kind of hydrocarbons reserves. We have already used our large rivers to install large hydropower plants, so we have no other possibilities to enhance that. But we are extremely dependent on weather conditions, particularly, the El Nino phenomena, which causes that hydrological condition can vary tremendously from one year to the other. And we are living in a region, our main neighbors, Argentina and Brazil, are having experiences also important difficulties in order to cope with for their domestic necessities. And on top of that, the economy was growing at extraordinary rates. Poverty was reduced from 40% to less than 8%. So energy demand was increasing. So 15 years ago, we were really living the perfect storm. So we made dramatic changes in the last years. And where are we now? Well, this is the present situation now in the power sector. The power sector now have a variety of offers taking into account all our natural resources. And if you can see the total figure, you will see that last year, more than 99% of electricity was coming from a combination of renewable sources. This has been happening for the last 7, 8 years in Uruguay. Perhaps last year was the best one, with more than 99%, but with a combination of different renewable sources, not just hydro. Hydro is not more than 50%. And this is, of course, an extraordinarily large number if we compare to the world average, which is not even 30% less for power electricity, for power generation. And perhaps one of the most interesting point here is that we succeeded to do that without any battery or energy storage facility, just the complementarity between different renewable sources. This is perhaps the most interesting point that we succeeded to prove to the world, that this is possible, that it is possible to manage intermittency within the complementarity of different sources. Of course, we need to deeply innovate in order to do that, but this is possible, and it has been working at least for the last 6, 7 years. Of course, we can say that we have decarbonized our power mix. The emissions, either you measure them per capita or per kilowatt hour produced, are something that 40 times smaller than the world average. So yes, we can say that we have decarbonized our mix at this, the power mix. And perhaps this is one of the most interesting points, is that the cost was negative, if I may say it in this way, because we have decreased the cost, the production electricity cost, because we prove, of course, that renewables are now the best option, are the lowest cost option. In fact, the impact on the economy was huge because the total cost of producing electricity has been decreased by about the 1% of the total GDP of the country. So it has a tremendous positive impact on the whole cost of the economy. We had succeeded to decrease from $10 per the cost of kilowatt hour production to about 1/2 of that. So of course, this has an impact to production and to households and to the whole microeconomy of the country. But perhaps more important than the cost reduction is cost stabilization, because we are not dependent on those crazy fluctuations on energy commodity prices. We are not impacted by wars or other geopolitical events because our costs are stabilized in the long-term run. I can tell you it is going to be the cost of electricity in 10 years from now, for example, in the country. And of course, we succeeded that in creating the appropriate condition for money to come. This is crucial, of course. We received about $6 billion investments in only 5 years. And this, for a small economy like Uruguay, is huge because it represents more than 10% of the GDP of the country. So it's an incredible amount of money that produced this rapid effect, but also had another very interesting implication for the whole economy. For example, we succeeded to create 50,000 new jobs. And this may sound small for you, but for a 3 million inhabitants country, it's huge. This is something about 3% of the total labor force of the country that was coming from this energy transition that took place in my country. And of course, at the same time, we succeeded to almost disappear the problem of energy access, because 99.9% of households has electricity in the country, either with increase in the grid extension or with off-grid solutions. Nowadays, only about 1,000 households lost in the middle of nowhere in the country are without electricity. And perhaps another interesting point is that we used to be net electricity import, and now we are exporting electricity. We are exporting renewable energy surpluses to our two gigantic neighbors, Argentina and Brazil. And the total amount of dollars that we receive every year is of the order of 1% of the GDP. So we are exporting renewable electricity, and we are having incomes, incredible incomes to our whole economy. So what the main takeaway of my presentation today is that today, no doubt, transition is possible. And transition is possible elsewhere. It's not because we are a small country. For small country, transitions are much more difficult, believe me. It's not because we have hydro. Without hydro, perhaps you cannot get 99%, but 80, 90% for sure, you will get it. It's creating the appropriate conditions. And perhaps the more important takeaways are, first of all, yes, transition is possible. Yes, it is possible to manage an electricity system with almost 100% of electricity, of renewable electricity, about half of that from intermittent sources, wind and solar. Yes, this happens. And yes, this is cheapest. And this brings a lot of economy possibility, socioeconomic benefits, creating jobs, reducing cost, bringing a spillover of the whole economy. So nowadays, I used to say that in the former times of 2015, in the Paris Agreement, when NDC means that countries have to make determined contribution in order to help for decarbonization to happen. Today, NDC, I like to say that they are national development catalysts, because we can use NDCs in order to catalyze the development of our countries with introduction of these new technologies that, even if climate change didn't exist, even then, they will be the best solution for our countries. But there is a very important point on this. The point is that even if it's the best option, even from the economical point of view, transition is not going to happen spontaneously. Market by themselves cannot resolve the whole things that need to be changed in order to things to happen. The whole and most important point is that in all of countries, the power system has been created, designed in order to favor the penetration of thermal third generation. And this is not a difficulty. I mean, this is just past. I mean, thermal fossil fuel generation was the best option for decades. But nowadays, we need to change. We need to change the way we plan the system. We need to change the way we operate the system. Because believe me, if we want to operate the system with 40% of wind using traditional operation system, it doesn't work. We have to deeply innovate in that. We have to change regulations in order to plan and to operate this new system. And most important than that, we need to change the design of the power markets. We need completely different power markets based on long-term contracts, not on short-term spot markets, bidding processes by long-term bidding processes. It's a dramatically different shape that we need in order to put in place the new markets to benefit, to prove the whole potential of renewable sources. And this is where you enter in the game, because as you are all aware, we need to change not only at technical aspects from the executive branch of governments, but we also need to change laws. Without changing some crucial laws, it will not be possible to build the appropriate conditions for renewables to express all their potentials. Thank you very much.
Great. Ramon, can you stay there for 1 second? I just had a quick follow-up, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because excellent presentation, by the way. The 99.1% renewables is a model, and we can learn a lot from small countries like the UAE, small population, Singapore, city-states. Can you answer the question, how did you avoid having any of your population without energy? Because you always hear this idea, you go 100% renewables, you have real supply problems, intermittency, you don't have the battery storage. How did you overcome this in the earlier days of adoption to renewables, please?
Well, of course, you have to think absolutely out of the box. This is crucial. You cannot do this kind of things, just adding renewables to the grid. This is not the work. I mean, this is just the title of your book. You know, to really make an energy transition and to take the advantage of the whole power of the new technologies, you have to think out of the box. And this means that the way that you operate the system is completely different. In base load in our country is wind and solar. They are the kings. I mean, all the rest follows the variability of wind and sun. We can have with a weekend advance, which is the amount of wind and solar we're going to have in the system, but all the rest have to follow that. And this is crucial. You need a flexibility. You cannot have, for example, a coal-power plant. A coal-power plant doesn't work because you have to make all the technologies following the intermittency of wind and solar. So this is one example of the way we can have to think absolutely out of the box. So I mean, the grid design, the demands and everything has to be moved to a way to put in the center wind and solar, and this is crucial. In many moments in the day, 100% of electricity is just wind and sun, because the total installed capacity equals more or less the total peak demand of the country. So all the rest is following when the wind is going down and the sun is going down.
Okay, quick follow-up too. How do you maintain in a democracy continuity of policy?
Absolutely.
So does energy policy in a special bucket where it doesn't get reversed like we're going to see in the U.S. or not?
This was absolutely crucial, and not only in the U.S., all over the world we are seeing this. I mean, we define a long-term policy that has been backed by the entire political system. We had 4 consecutive governments with different colors, and all of them we followed the same policy, because it was backed by a whole political agreement. But for example, I have been Secretary of Energy during 2 presidents. I served 2 presidents, 2 consecutive presidents, because there was a continuity in the way of changing things. And this was because we created a narrative that proves that this is the best option. Once again, even if climate change didn't exist, this is the best option. You create jobs, you reduce costs, you stabilize costs. What else do you need? And you become independent on fluctuation, on geopolitical events. This is the best for your own interest.
Yeah, after Russia, Ukraine, we learned the shock of not having access to energy, but if you're dependent on your own sources, even better. Can we give a nice round of applause? Ramon, thank you very much for being so direct as well. I appreciate that. And we're moving directly to our next roundtable discussion, financing the energy transition and therefore regional cooperation. We talked about national cooperation with Ramon there. Sergio Misana is the Secretary General of Climate Parliament. Jackson Kiswaga is a Member of Parliament for Tanzania. It's a very important month with the big target of 300 million. Rosa Galvez is joining us from Canada. She's a senator there. And Senator Sitada Ayez is Secretary General of the International Parliamentarians Congress. It's great to have you all. As we discussed before we got started, each intervention on the question and answer is to 3 minutes or less. It worked out terrifically in the first session. We want to leave some leeway for you to provide additional analysis, and of course we want to hear from those on the floor as we did in the first hour. Sergio, would you like to get us started? And this issue has been raised about the challenges of getting the international lending institutions to devote money to different regions of the world, particularly in those in the developing world. The environmental, social, and governance issues used as a screen sometimes by institutional investors not to invest. So what's your perspective in terms of, with the parliamentarians and the legislatures, to try to knock down some of these barriers so assets are deployed and you have more regional cooperation, not less? Please.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and for that excellent question. I'd like to answer in very practical terms and say a little bit about what the Climate Parliament is doing to attract, finance, mobilize parliamentary support for financing for renewable energy. The Climate Parliament is a network of climate and environment champions. We have been working for 25 years in this field, building capacity and also organizing parliamentarians and with a strong emphasis in action. We're currently implementing a project called Parliamentarians for Climate Finance with funding from the Green Climate Fund and in collaboration with the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. Working initially in 15 African countries, but it's work that we're planning on expanding very soon to other countries in Africa and other regions of the world. This is a project that will focus on capacity building of parliamentarians on climate finance, but also on developing toolkits for the legislators and also organizing a dialogue with investors, from the private and public sector, international and domestic, but also with officials, ministers, regulators, academic experts on creating the conditions for this flow of green finance. A lot of this work will be focused on what we're calling green zones, and that means identifying specific areas within the countries that have excellent renewable energy resources, and focusing on developing not only renewable energy in those areas, but also green industries that are linked to those resources. It could be green hydrogen, green iron, steel, cement, ammonia, even data centers. Areas that have good connectivity in terms of transmission, and areas where it is possible to work on risk management, not only in terms of easy permitting, on transparency, but also guarantees that have been discussed here. So this is going to be, our strategy is to going into a zonal approach, particularly because that would allow us to avoid the opposition of vested interests if we try to do it at national level, but also because the resources for guarantees, for instance, guarantees to address political risk, currency risk, payment risks, are limited, and so doing it in a zonal approach would be very, very good. In your question, you were asking about cooperation. One area where cooperation is absolutely essential, and it's a critical infrastructure for leaving fossil fuels behind and doing a transition along the lines of what Uruguay has done, is international interconnections, continental grids, and we have done work on that. Cooperation is crucial on that. The Climate Parliament created and started and developed an initiative called the Green Grids Initiative, which is currently working very well, and among other things, just as an example, working on a connection and interconnection in southern Africa called Zizabona, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Namibia, which aims to carry solar energy from the deserts in the west of the region to the load centers, to the big cities in the east. But having said that, one should be realistic when talking about cooperation on climate finance, that many private investors speak of a race. In other words, there is cooperation, but also it is very important for countries to create the conditions for private investment, and absolutely I agree that the role of private capital is fundamental, but in some cases the investors see this as a race, and they're looking at which countries can create those conditions, and in that sense, there's an element of competition and there's a potential element of collaboration.
Excellent intervention there. Thank you, Sergio. It's interesting to note that the Continental Grid subject is going to be at the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week in the private session convened by the CEO of Masdar. So 3 or 4 years ago, this was not part of the conversation, but you see this cross-border collaboration in a big way, and it does help a country raise financing if you have a bigger footprint, no doubt. I'll circle back thereafter. Jackson Kisawaga, it's nice to have you. This is a very important month for Tanzania,
Yes.
January 27th, 28th, and
Yes,
the
indeed.
mission 300 million to get access to 300 million more consumers, particularly in Africa, right, which is the kind of the soft spot in terms of the lack of development. I always say it's difficult to understand why we have 675 million people without electricity in the 21st century, right? If we could put a man on the moon, we should be able to tackle this. So I'm really happy that the government's addressing it. Can we focus in on some of your successes here? The Shinyaga solar plant, for example, and the hydroelectric station Kakono, right? And you did get international financing and support. With that experience, how can you discuss in that context cooperation and collaboration, and can they serve as case studies for other African states in your view, please?
Yes, thank you very much. As you mentioned, my name is Jackson Kisawaga from the Parliament of Tanzania. I serve in the Committee of Water and Environment as a chairperson of that committee. Yeah, you spoke about the Shinyanga and Kakono as a learning experience and to share with others. Yes, indeed. What the Tanzania is doing now, first of all, we established an organization, government organization, to ensure that we do feasibility study across the country to see the potentials of renewable energy we have in the country. With us, we discovered some number of sites whereby, like in solar energy, we can develop up to 5 gigawatts of energy, the same to wind, the same to geothermal, with 52 sites identified. So through feasibility study, which my government did, in particular Shinyanga and Kakono, we were able to attract international funding, and the AFD gave us a concession loan to ensure that we established that big project of about 150 megawatts, and we're going to start producing this year. I mean, 50 megawatts is going to be integrated into grid, particularly maybe in August, we expect. So with that project, we see it's a good start, I mean, to welcome many international investors because of the cooperation which has been shown based on the feasibility study and the guarantee which the government is offering to ensure that the electricity that will be produced can be bought by the government, and also the capacity building within the local talents. So it's a good because of the feasibility study, which the Tanzania is doing in various areas. So it has attracted the international funding to come and invest in Tanzania. Yeah.
Great. Just a quick follow-up, and it was raised by Dennis, the legislator from Uganda. They have had access to oil and gas facilities. Mozambique has developed its natural gas. Tanzania has natural gas at its resource. How do you balance these priorities, and do you need to develop those assets? What's the view from Tanzania's standpoint? Because you're serving on climate and energy and water, right? The committees. How do you view the need or necessity, or do you not need it domestically in the country?
Yeah, okay. That's a challenge to balance between the development of our natural gases we have in Tanzania. Okay, I mean, as you're aware that, of course, Tanzania is warming faster than maybe many countries in Africa, Tanzania and Ethiopia, according to the recent report. So our big focus is not in the gas. Now our big focus, we are focusing more on renewable energy, talking about the solar. That's a big focus. Also, we are focusing more on geothermal development, which we believe once we develop all the sites we have, it will help, I mean, for Tanzania to get enough power we need. Although we understand it's very costly, I mean, even the feasibility study require a lot of money. So with that, because of the challenges now we see in the climate change, particularly the impact and effects of the climate change in Tanzania. So we are a little bit slowly in, in going much into gas. Yeah, there are plans, but I don't see the big focus. The big focus now, particularly, is in renewable energy, particularly solar and geothermal, followed by wind. Yeah.
Very good. I wasn't aware of the geothermal. Thanks for your candor, but it's just an issue that came up here with Uganda before. So, not to surprise you with it, but it's interesting to hear it, and it's also enlightening to hear the challenges you face because of the pace of climate change. Right? It's the real deal, which a lot of people forget when they think in theory about the content, but there's the continent itself, right? The challenges are there. Rose Galvez, and I'll circle back to your panelists for the second round of topics. Senator from Canada, and again, we're talking concretely about collaboration and legislation, and you championed the Climate Aligned Finance Act, better known by its acronym CAFA. Do you want to discuss what it took to get that into place and to kind of lay out the roadmap for financing? And if you can, do you want to also address some of the challenges? There's kind of inherent resistance sometimes from legacy players. So how did it work for the country, and how difficult was it to get it through Parliament? Thanks.
Thank you so much, John, for the question. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here with all of you. This is a very important and crucial humanity determining well-being for the future. So, who will imagine that in Canada we have these kind of problems because we have so much rivers, so much water, forests, etc., etc. But unfortunately, my country is a petrostate. It is being historically a lot of petroleum. But it is interesting to see that provinces, as states in the United States, are very independent. And so you will have in Canada provinces that are well ahead and that they will continue despite of the different governments, like Quebec, my province. You will have different governments, but the north is very clear, and we are in the move to low carbon economy and renewable energy. But in the rest of Canada, it's not like that. So I am an engineer, I am a civil engineer, and we've been teaching for the last 20 years that we were in the transition. And so when you see that our brains, our young people is leaving because in the country there is no transition, you worry. And then when you see that the Canada being a G7 country has not attained decoupling GDP growth with emissions, is worrying. So I help a lot in passing a lot of legislations, including the Net Zero 2050 bill that says that we will be net zero by 2050. I also help in passing the Just Transition legislation. And still, we were not moving, and still emissions were not reducing. So then I came to the conclusion that none sector is going to move from oil and gas unless the financial sector starts saying, okay, let's move the money from oil and gas to renewable energy. Right now, still, our financial sector invests $3.9 in the oil and gas for $1 in the renewable energy. And for us, the financial sector is composed of the banks, the insurance, and the pension plans. And so we come to know that our pension plans and our insurance are investing a great deal of money in renewable energy elsewhere, but not in Canada.
That's amazing. You said it's, just so the purpose of clarity, you said it's 4-1, oil and gas to renewables. Yes. That's extraordinary. But the banks are investing outside the country in renewables. Why is that?
Yeah, well, it is because, as you said it, is that the system is there, the inertia of the system prefers oil and gas. And you will have some very critical incoherence, such as, for example, producing oil and gas from oil sands or the tar sands using hydroelectricity or using natural gas. So we really need to change that. So my bill is trying to do that, trying to change the status quo, trying to change the missions, trying to change the objectives of a certain critical organization like the superintendents of financial institutions, or changing the mission of the Bank of Canada, or changing the mission of the insurance company or the pension plans.
Mission possible or mission impossible, Rosa?
I thought that it was impossible, but it's been now 2 years, and the House of Commons, I am in the Senate, the House of Commons started their own study on my bill because they saw that there are obstacles from certain parties, and I have now the support of 4 parties out of 6. And so I think we are moving, and we, despite of what's going on, you know, the prorogation and the resignation of our prime minister and Trump elections, I think that this is unstoppable because of the independence on geopolitics, the fact that it's local, the fact that it's cheaper, the fact that technology is there, the fact that continuing with fossil fuel is inflationary, and that renewable energy is deflationary. So, you know, everybody's getting to the same conclusion. We need to move.
Okay. I won't be cheeky and ask what you think about being the 51st state of the United States, but I won't be. So we don't have any criticisms of me provoking, but we should have a side note conversation about it, I think.
Some of the American states can become provinces of Canada.
In the Gulf of America. Sometimes I wonder what I'm reading on a day-to-day basis of whether it's real or not real, right? But thank you very much. And I don't take me too seriously on that note. I don't want the Director General thinking I've gone AWOL here with my debate topics. We'll stick to energy. But thank you very much. But you did make the link about the fact that it is inflationary if you don't manage it correctly. Senator Sitara, yes, it's great to have you. And you're representing the International Parliamentarians Congress. And this is a crucial issue, and it was addressed in our first roundtable, and again, Sergio, you brought it up. This is the gap, you know, in the UK we say mind the gap on the underground between the train and the platform. This is the gap in energy for the developing world, is it not? It's what the multilateral institutions and the regional investment banks are doing to provide that financing and the credit guarantees and the currency exposure guarantees. What frameworks are you working on, and what are needed to ensure that we can unlock this gap, Sitara? Do you want to pick it up there, please? Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's an honor for me to be here today. And as the Secretary General of International Parliamentarian Congress, I represent an organization dedicated to fostering collaboration among legislators worldwide to address global challenges. Your question is very pertinent, and bridging the gap between the global energy transition and the financial constraint faced by developing countries is indeed one of the most pressing challenges of our time. And it's very clear that international financing institution and multilateral partnerships have made developments, but the current frameworks are not enough. And we strongly believe that to address this, we need to focus on 3 crucial areas, and that is accessibility, predictability, and equity. Accessibility is a finances mechanism right now, how it is that many of our countries, we know that they don't have much of, they can't reach, like there are so many promises in COPs for the countries who are facing the problem and all these energy problems and resources there. So I think the mechanism must be tailored to unique needs of developing countries. This means simplifying the application process for funding, and ensuring that countries with limited administrative capacities, because we notice that they need capacity building to reach these funds, because they don't have much capacities, and they are left out, many of them, because of it. And we notice, again, I will go back to the COPs, all the COPs, what the pledges and promises made. Many of the countries, they did not get that. So I think it should be simple, and the countries should reach them easily. And then the international fund like IDFC, International Development Finance Club, and Green Climate Fund must work together to make it more simple and to for the regional bodies to fill this gap. And then the predictability. Developing nation needs stable and predictable funding streams. Again, we notice so many times the problems facing by the developing countries, and the international finances institution must move beyond the ad hoc projects funding, ad hoc based funding to long-term commitments, and this involves setting up mechanism like energy transition bonds, which can be co-financed by developed nations, private investors, and regional development banks. For instance, the development banks are actively de-risking green investment to enable a substantial renewable energy investment in the developing world. Equity is the third thing which we feel that the transition can not be just about numbers. It has to be about justice. Resources must be allocated based on both need and potential impact, and this requires a transparent framework that includes all stakeholders from government to civil society and decision making process. Again, here we can talk about the role of legislators, which is very, very important, because they are the policy makers and they are the one, they can give suggestions to their governments. They can sit with them, they can draw bills, they can work on their bills, as she's also just mentioned, the honorable senator, that she is the one who's working on it, and we wish and hope that you will be successful next year when we are sitting. She will be telling us the success story of hers. So this is, I think, very important, and I want to finally I want to emphasize that the solution is not just financial. It's also about the partnership. Multilateral institution, governments, and organization. Like we are working with the IPC, International Parliamentarian Congress. We are working with the parliamentarians around the world. So we can actively connect in parliamentarian across the continent to exchange legislative best practices and mobilize support for inclusive energy policies. To conclude, while the challenges are significant, the opportunities are immense. And if we align our efforts, prioritize equity and innovative financing framework, I believe we can turn this ambitions into a tangible outcome.
Great. Thanks to Tara for that. That's the first round of questions. I just want to remind the audience that after the second round of questions, we're going to do what we did in the first round, is open the floor up for interventions and comments, which is terrific. It's where we're getting some very good analysis. Sergio, picking up on Satara's point here, the power of legislation, right? And Dr. Noemi said it at the beginning. Wouldn't it be more powerful? You can get regional cooperation on legislation. So a block of countries, whether it's in South America or Latin America, that start to have like-minded policies. It creates synergies and then cross-border energy sharing. Why is that so important today? And what are the challenges and opportunities from cross-border or regional cooperation?
Yes, as I was mentioning, we have advanced collaboration and created a framework for collaboration, also taking into consideration that legislators can act by themselves, but also act as conveners for other stakeholders, including heads of government, but including private sector and others. But we have advanced this kind of collaboration when it comes to grids in the context of that Green Grids initiative. But at the same time, right now, as I was saying, we are moving into this zonal approach toward actually not thinking transnationally, but subnationally in terms of changing regulation. And the idea of this, again, as I was saying, is that if you're trying to change legislation or change the regulation at the national level, you have a high chance of facing the opposition of vested interests. Whereas if you say this specific area is ideal for green hydrogen or for nature-based solutions in some cases for conservation of biodiversity, you might be able to carve and have specific legislation and regulation that will allow you to, for instance, manage risk or have transparency mechanisms and auctions, easy permitting, and other facilitating conditions that will allow you to develop in that area. And then one possibility would be collaboration at that subnational level. In other words, connecting these zones across borders, and that, among other things, would guarantee that the electrons that you're moving are green. Because, of course, one key challenge of working on continental grids, which are essential for transitioning to 100 renewable energy, is that you could have that faulty narrative of, let's say, gas being a transition fuel, and then you have dirty electrons going through that infrastructure. So,
great.
yeah. So,
Very clear. So it's not picking winners, those, but it's saying what the advantages of certain zones within a country, and then that cross-border collaboration coming out of it. Then, right, is the potential there. Very interesting. Can I get quick analysis on? Now I start to see that the conversation about grids is finally coming to the fore. But you can't have an energy transition without modernization of your grid. Can legislators have an impact on that as well, in your view, please?
yes, absolutely. And also, not only modernization, not only do you need to have smart grids that increase energy efficiency, which is crucial, but also you need to cover enough ground so your energy system is outside of a weather system. In other words, you do need that continental transmission in order to address the variability of the resources. You cannot function with your own wind or with your own solar, but if you're harnessing across a vast area, you can address the intermittency much better.
Good.
Parliamentarians would have a role to play in
yeah, this is something that's I just saw picking up within ARENA, but also in the wider private sector community here. I know Masdar is making it an initiative at this ADSW. Ramon, I didn't want to overlook you, so you feel free to weigh in on some of the comments that are made as well after your presentation. Jackson, how do you streamline federal policy then? Can you use an example of in Tanzania how you're trying to streamline it? Sergio was saying so we can accelerate. Rosa and Sitara were saying the same. How do we implement things faster? Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. First of all, I must speak the current policy we have. We have the policy, the energy policy, which speaks about the renewable energy, how we can invite investors to come and invest in Tanzania. But it has been a complaint from many investors about the negotiation procedures when it comes to renewable energy projects. And what we have decided as a country now is to streamline our policies, including building the capacity of regulatory bodies. But also, as a country now, we're thinking of going digitalization in terms of permitting. So, in that, by so doing, and we believe it will be more attractive and more efficient for people to decide and come to invest in that particular area. So we see this important, of course, of doing that, reviewing our policies, particularly when it comes to renewable energies, fast tracking the approval of the renewable energy projects, and also creating an environment which are more conducive for investors to come to invest in Tanzania. Also, if you can allow me about the regionalization, you spoke when you started about the head of states conference, which is coming on 27th and 28th. I would like to say that is a typical example of regional cooperation, because we are focusing about 300 million people in sub-Saharan Africa, and we'll be talking about doubling our energy, renewable energy by 50% in 5 years to come. And we are talking about adoption of clean cooking, as well as engaging the private sectors to invest in a clean, in renewable energy. So it'll be a huge discussion about this area, talking about the regional cooperation, but also investing in that particular area. So,
great. Can I follow up on that? Who led that? Was it the president of Tanzania
yes,
that did it?
yes. Our president, Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, is a champion of it. Is hosting that conference to ensure that it has an upper political will. Yeah, yes.
It's interesting. So you'll set targets for financing, I hope, out of this as well.
Of course. Yes.
Very good. No, congratulations. I just joined the board of SE for All, and the CEO is going to be down there, so I knew more about it than I thought I was planning to. But it's a phenomenal initiative, and this is where we really need to unlock and move the needle in Africa. So thanks for flagging it. I don't want to be too ambitious, Rosa, but I was wondering if we can use legislation as case studies around the world. And we have Sitara's group and Sergio's group here pooling different parliamentarians around the world. And how do you share information to say, you know what, that worked, for example, in Uruguay, or this worked in Tanzania, I want this to be shared elsewhere? What's the most effective way of doing so? Going back to the Director General and Dr. Noemi's point here, how do we move faster, right? Because times we're working against the clock, if you can.
Absolutely. I remember that when we start talking about transition, we were talking about a marathon. Today, we are talking about a sprint. We have to run fast. The clock is ticking. So each of us wear different hats. One of my hats is being the vice president of the network of Parlaméricas, which reunites all the parliaments of all the Americas, including the United States. And so this network has three axes of action. Open parliaments, which is very important to eliminate corruption and to have ideas coming from the ground. The second one is climate change and sustainability. And the third is equal gender equality. So these three overlaps, and the climate and the biodiversity and the desertification and all the COPs and the plastic, they are all related. And we need to see parliamentarians more holistic view of what is happening. And in particularly, I'm talking about, people say, okay, I'm going to the environment, but they don't go and see what the economy is. I sit in both, in the National Finance Committee, and I'm the chair of the Energy, Natural Resources, and Environment. So it allows to see what's going on in between, what are the reasons because people don't invest. But to come back to Parlaméricas is that we will write like white papers with a lot of cases around the world on sustainable finances, and we will put it in an archive that it's available to all parliamentarians. And so we can be inspired by them. One of them is giving judicial personhood to nature, or to do laws on greenwashing, or to circular economy. And so these are other type of bills that holistically try to solve the same issue that we are all in, which is uncontrolled pollution, uncontrolled inequality, and that needs holistic answers.
Great. Well, what a fantastic group here. Sitara, the final panel interjection is going to come from you, and then we have about 15 minutes, up to 15 minutes for interventions from the floor and questions. We often talk about public-private sector collaboration, and if you think to the average consumer or average voter, they think it's a lot of discussion but not action. I've noticed within ARENA there's been really successful employment of private sector dialogue with public to get things moving. How do we move the needle in South Asia? And I know India, for example, is moving very quickly on the renewable space. It's all the energy is needed. But how do we advance the public sector, private sector collaboration in the spirit of what Rosa was saying, where parliamentarians collaborate, but we make it easy for the private sector to come in. Thanks.
Yeah, South Asia is having a vast population and growing energy needs, and has immense potential for the private sector to invest in South Asia. And but there are few problems we are facing. Like, I remember that back in, if I'm not wrong, in 2019, I believe that I attended with the Climate Parliament. One conference back there, and they discussed very briefly regarding how the clean energy can be transported, can be exported to other countries. And I was very excited at that time, actually, for South Asia, for our area. And it is, yes, there are many changes, and many of our countries, they are working as a public-private partnership. And Bangladesh is also one of the good example that they recently they started this public-private partnership in solar home system, and have brought electricity to millions of off-grid household. But I strongly believe that we must that building trust through clear policy frameworks, that the government must have clear frameworks for the private sector, because they, if when the business person, when they know the rules of the game, they are more likely to commit to long-term renewable energy projects. And then innovative financing models. There should be low risk, like when the government is investing, like the public funds are used to de-risk private investment, then is a proven strategy. And then again, this Bangladesh model is there. And yes, you just mentioned India National Solar Mission, which is has been a game changer in mobilizing private investment. And the UK is also there. There are so many. Maldives are there. And then I think the regional cooperation of knowledge sharing is very, very important. And there comes the parliamentarians. And then we know that in South Asia we have so many political problems, might be, but this is the problem which we can solve, like with the help of the parliamentarians, to bring them, like this is the forum where the parliamentarian can come, the parliament, they can also bring, like this is what they are doing. And even IPC is willing to bring the South Asia together to sit, because that is very important. This can be a game changer in the future. As for the India, it can be for the whole region also. As I said, that there is a lot of businesses for the private sector, but the government should also be very serious for this. And the main thing is the collaboration. Public-private collaboration is the engine, but the fuel is innovation and regional unity, which is very, very important. And such kind of organizations who are working for this thing, they are here to bring them together to work. And I'm very positive, actually. I've always, as I said, that when I started with the Climate Parliament, since that time, I started in the Senate. When I was in the Senate, I started working with it. And we are the Pakistani Senate and the National Assembly. We are off grid now. We are using solar for the whole parliaments. So yes, of course, I think that these three things, like building trust through a clear policy framework, innovative finance models, and regional cooperation for knowledge sharing is very important in South Asia.
Great, nicely done. Ramon, I'll call before I go to the floor. Any analysis on what you've heard so far with this parliamentarian? I mean, we talked about regional collaboration here, moving the needle on energy access. How do you unlock your legislation in Canada? And how do you get collaboration, for example, in South Asia? This has come a long way in 5 years, but now we need to supercharge on the tripling of renewables by 2030 and doubling down on emissions, correct?
No way that there is no, we need to focus on all the different situation in different regions, different countries. I mean, there's no one size that fits all, that's for sure. But once again, I mean, I'm taking perhaps the two most important comments after these presentations. The first one is that we really need cooperation. I mean, if energy exchange was crucial in the previous world, in the future world, energy interaction and energy integration of the house system would be more and more crucial. This is my first comment. And the second one is that, once again, I mean, what we are seeing, for example, in Canada and the situation is that we really need to think out of the box. I mean, it's not just repeating and trying to make some minor modifications of the system that we have right now. We really need to build new systems, build on the characteristics of renewable energies, which are quite different than traditional ones.
Okay, thank you for taking that spontaneous question I had for you, but I think it's good in your role from your presentation just to provide that sort of analysis. Questions or interventions from the floor? It doesn't have to be a question, it could be a comment. So we have 1 and 2, and then we'll try to get more in, please.
Yes, I'm Nick Dunlop with Climate Parliament. First, I just want to say, Sitara, I remember that meeting that you made such a good contribution to. And we are still excited about connecting Pakistan and India to the Gulf to trade renewable energy, to trade solar in particular between time zones, connecting South Asia as a region, and connecting South Asia to Southeast Asia. Pakistan and India have a desert that they share. Southeast Asia is a huge, economically growing part of the world that has no desert, doesn't have particularly good wind resources either compared to South Asia. So we really need connections east and west from South Asia to the Gulf on one side and ASEAN on the other. We must keep working on it. Ramon, I had a question for you. I just wanted to say first, congratulations. We've been, all of us interested in renewable energy, have been following Uruguay's story for years now, and it has really been an inspiration. And we know that you were the architect of that inspiring revolution that's gone on in Uruguay. I'm not aware of any country that has done such a brilliant job of making the transition look easy, though I'm sure it wasn't. And I was very interested in the little passing remark you made that it's harder for small countries than for big countries. And in big countries, you hear exactly the opposite. You hear, oh, well, Norway can go to 100% electric vehicles because it's small. Singapore can do this because New Zealand, where I'm from, can do this or that because it's small. I'd like you to explain to the big country people here why it's harder for small countries. But I also just had one other question for you, and that is looking at the pie chart you put up of the energy mix in Uruguay today, 50% hydro, a lot of wind. What struck me is not much solar, in fact, and yet you said wind and solar are the sort of bedrock of the power supply. Is it not much solar because when you got started, the prices were a bit different? Solar was more expensive than wind. Now perhaps it's even less expensive than wind. Do you expect to see the share of solar perhaps increasing, perhaps at the expense of the biomass component, which may be more problematic in the long run from a climate point of view? So it'd be really interesting to hear from you about that too.
Great, thank you, Nicholas. Ramon, do you want to jump in there first? Thanks. Just be careful on time. That's all.
Yeah, it's yes, of course. You got the point. I mean, we began that 15 years ago, and that time wind was much less expensive than solar. And on our case, we just wanted to prove that renewables were the cheapest option. So we jumped on the optimized option for the whole mix, okay? But nowadays, for sure, for the future 10 years at least, will be solar, and the amount of solar is going to increase dramatically in the next years. So this is just for finance, as you got a point. As for your first question, for a small country, you have much more difficulty to access to finance, first of all, which is the most important point. So we have to really understand that renewable is just a financial issue. It's a financial business. It's not just a traditional energy business. So de-risking is the first and most important point. So all our policy was to de-risk everything. And de-risking in a global south country, believe me, it's much more difficult than de-risking in a global north country. Second, we have less people. So we have less prepared people, less universities, less knowledge. Global knowledge nowadays is absolutely crucial. And in order to innovate, you need knowledge. So this is also a difficulty. Third, small country means small scale. Small scale means it's much more difficult to build yourself. So you have to import a lot of things. So you have a lot of logistics difficulties that are completely different from a large country. And well, I can continue, but for sure, I would prefer doing that in a larger country than what happened in
And yet, you've done the best job of anyone in the world in a small country.
Well, thank
so
you.
there must be some advantages too, right?
Absolutely, yes, there is. Yes.
So decision making is easy, but you did talk about the hurdles that are there, Nicholas. I think, which is a great question that you asked. Right? We always say it's interesting in the UAE or Singapore or other small countries around the world, like in Uruguay. You can make decisions really quickly, but you need scale, right, to make it attractive. So if you have a country like a Pakistan, offers 250 million consumers. India's 1.4 billion consumers. So it's the trade-off, I think, is here. We have an intervention, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, John. This is Stefan from the Global Renewables Congress, and also congratulating Ramon for all the achievements in Uruguay. But in the same time, I also think we should look at Pakistan as a country and the renewable energy trajectory that is unfolding there. So there are a couple of examples of sort of new players in the market that are really interesting. I have one comment which I package into a question, if I may, and that is concerning the question of funding. And Ramon, you alluded to that question of de-risking. When we talk to foundations or investors, it's all about how do we make investment more secure, and how do we, in other words, how do we de-risk? And one question I had would be, and here that's coming up here and there, is whether pooling of investments, pooling of projects, of renewable energy projects, so that they become larger investment opportunities, could be not an option when we look at financing. Because I hear that many people who would like to finance, then they end up with a few solar containers, which they could invest, and then they say, this is not the scale I'm thinking of, I'm sorry. But if that would be a combination of different projects, so that it becomes a larger project, probably including additional services like cooking, like making the connection between cooking and renewable electricity generation, which works even in off-grid or near-grid regions. So I'd like to, and that's my question, I'd like to hear a bit more about like what de-risking really means, and whether pooling of investment is not something that we should be considering. Last point is, when it comes to parliamentarians, I just want to remind ourselves that collaboration really is key. We heard this, but not just between parliamentarians and business, but also between different parties. And the dynamic in a parliament, and Hans-Josef Ferl alluded to this, is the Renewable Energy Feed-in Tariff Law came from a Conservative and a Green Party member, and they really teamed up in the first place. In the very first place, this is how it started, and then it was a collaboration of different members of parliament from different parties. So my point is really, how do we increase collaboration among parties and among committees, different committees in the parliament? Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. We have Dennis and then the woman from Uganda in the front row. Pooling resources. Ramon, do you want to address that just very quickly? How do we pool resources to get scale?
Yes, pooling is crucial, but in order to come to a given country, you need investment at least of 100, 150, $200 million. Less than that is not efficient. So you need at least wind and solar parks of the order of 100 or 200 megawatts. And this is already a size enough in order to attract investors.
Okay, great, thank you. Christine, thanks for being so patient. I know you wanted to make an interjection. Can you make a quick one here before we bring Dennis in and we'll close out the session? Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mine was on following up with the de-risking under the previous COP29 resolution of limiting warming, enhancing ambition, and ensuring an inclusive process. So there are we would like to hear of some other innovations. There is one called ecocide, making ecocide a crime, and then platforms for reporting back within our parliaments, but also in the IRENA fraternity. So at this moment, we would like to track, to energize ourselves and also revise how we can track performance of this at parliamentary levels and also global platforms.
Great, we brought that up with Sitara and Rosa, and it's a kind of call to action. How do we share the best national policies, right? That's what you're asking, and to see the global. What's the most efficient way of doing that, would you say, Rosa? Thank you.
I think that we all want the same thing. When we were talking about the parties, you know, I said I have the support of 4 of the 5 parties, and it's because we all want the same thing. We have good jobs, we want the clean air, clean water, we have enough money to send our children to school. And so when you put this, and we all want safe streets and less drugs available. So then when you start saying all of these things, and then you say, hey, but our banks are using our money elsewhere, then it's easy to bring people together. And when we share experiences and not one thing fits everybody, so we start adapting, and then we have results. I remember listening a lot of Costa Rica, and so coming to Canada and talk about Costa Rica, knowing what is in Germany, and talking the success there in Germany, in Canada. And so then people start having an image of possibility, of opportunity, and of success, instead of being depressed and sad about situations.
Great. Okay, Dennis, you have the last word, and then we're going to close out the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question for Sergio and Starai. They have recognized the role of collaboration and partnership in financing renewable energy and also green grid. Countries like DRC have the potential to power the whole of Africa. Why is there little attention paid to such potentials or countries? I need to appreciate what must they do, and how can they be supported? 2, I chair a parliamentary network on illicit financial flows in East Africa. There is a strong link between illicit financial flows and development of renewables and also investments. We need to mobilize adequate resources as countries to support energy transition and develop our renewables. And this has been impeded by illicit financial flows, money moving out of our economies to different jurisdictions, powered by the global community. So it's important that in coming up with the policies to facilitate, or in our effort to sprint, we must be able to deal with the illicit financial flows that is constraining a number of countries. Lastly, I wanted to understand from Ramon what specific financial models they deployed in their country to achieve the kind of results they have been able to achieve. We could be able to leverage on that in many parts of Africa to ensure we benefit from your experience. If we would particularly know what innovative financial models financing models you put in place to support your investments in renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dennis, I didn't think you were going to ask three questions. You kind of threw me for a curve there. So you're going to force our repliees to be very short. Very key questions, can I say? Illicit finance, how do you get money into the DRC? And there's falls into the ESG bucket that we talked about before. And how do we facilitate this lending? Sergio, and I'm going to ask Ramon to jump in very quickly, please. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Dennis, for those very provocative questions. You're right about the DRC, and I would say in general, Africa has been making progress in terms of having a continental power system master plan and plans for an integrated energy market across Africa. So there is progress that is being done in terms of energy integration across the whole continent. The project that we're working on, Sisabona, was a project for which there existed pre-feasibility studies. It's a project that has mutated to being more pro-renewable energy. There's actually potential to do energy integration in numerous areas within Africa. I would say strategically it would make sense to bet on solar, wind, and geothermal rather than hydro, just because climate change is affecting the availability of the hydro resource. That doesn't mean discarding it, but having to understand that the availability of that resource in the future is going to be limited. But again, there's great potential for energy integration, great benefits to be reaped from that. Even intercontinental links, like the possibility of connecting Morocco to Europe, which is being done by a company now called X-Links. And then, as my colleague Nick was saying, also connecting Africa with the Gulf and South Asia. But an excellent question nonetheless.
Great. The other thing is, too, that we're doing a session at ADSW on critical minerals and also in Davos the week after. There's been some very innovative products to finance railways, for example, in Uganda, right? There's U.S. money coming in. A lot of the lending institutions now are trying to build up on the infrastructure to make things happen in Africa at a faster pace. We often overlook it, but you can't have a transition without the strategic minerals and metals, right? And there's a lot of activity now to build the infrastructure to make it happen at a faster pace. It's not easy. Final analysis from Dennis's question, please.
No, very, very quickly, because we can talk for half an hour about how to do risk.
Yeah, each one of those. Yeah, exactly.
So, but we can do it afterwards. But just a few words. First of all, long-term contracts. Long-term contracts based on take-or-pay basis, without this crazy obligation for that are happening still in some countries, that they have to inject some electricity in the grid even if they cannot produce it. So it's long-term contracts with a fixed price, which is based on bidding processes, where what is bidded is the long-term contract itself. So this brings a stability for both the investor and the demand, which is absolutely crucial in the whole business. Then there are other things that I can discuss with you if you wish. For example, different kind of insurances in order to make sure that the off-taker is going to pay. Even there are some instruments, international instruments, in order to back all these insurances. So, I mean, we can discuss afterwards if you wish. But to build in the whole, the risking process is the most important point.
Great. And that comes up time and again on de-risking. I would like to see more collaborations between the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the AIIB, or the BRICS banks, as well as the African Development Bank. There's a lot of geopolitics there, right, yes, Ramon?
The World Bank has a very interesting mechanism in order to help the risking processes.
Okay. Another issue that's come up is, should African states have better access to low-cost renewable wind turbines and PV panels and battery storage, right? We have to take the politics out of this in terms of trade as well, to ease the way for funding to get into Africa. Fantastic 2 sessions. Thank you very much to our first panel and our second panel and the questions from the floor. I greatly appreciate it. Ramon, that was a really laser perfect presentation to give us the case study for Uruguay. I appreciate, of course, Francesco Lacamera's overarching themes. And Dr. Al-Suwaidi, please, Mira, pass our regards to him. for the passion tone that he set for a much better debate for the last 2 hours. Nice round of applause for everybody. The contributions are from the youth as well. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for reminding me. We wanted to get panel 1 and panel 2 to come up for a group photo, please, if we can.
At the back? I think here. All right.